2024 was a great year for Irish whiskey, with some really well established brands releasing some great whiskies and some new players entering the market. And, well, the Irish Whiskey Awards just happened, recognising some of those great whiskies, and today I'm going to tell you about some of the winners of the Irish Whiskey Awards. I'm Matt, I'm the Whiskey Nerd, and like I said, today I'm going to talk about some of the winners, starting with this one right here, the best new Irish single malt, which is a whiskey from Cullen. Cullen at the Powerscourt Distillery are a very great little distillery, and this is the brand new single malt whiskey they released, all their own stuff, so it hasn't been sourced, and it comes in at 46% ABV. Now, while I know this, and while I enjoy it, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Irish Whiskey Awards. So they're put on by the Celtic Whisky Shop, which is the kind of best Irish whiskey shop. It's here in Dublin. It's a great little store. The people in it are really well connected. They really know what they're talking about, and they put on like the Whisky Live Dublin Whisky Expo, which happens every year in Dublin, and it gets all the whiskey brands from around the world and around the country of Ireland together. So they put on the Irish Whiskey Awards every year towards the end of the year, and well, it just happened, and they put out their list of the best whiskies. But how are they judged? Very simple. All the different clubs, all the different societies, and a few kind of selected people come together and they do blind tastings. I myself, because I'm at the Irish Whiskey Society, I was invited to a few of the sessions and we got to taste some of the whiskies. And how it works is they divide the whiskies into kind of categories. So you get like budget blends, and you get like expensive blends, you get young single malts and old single malts and things like that, and the categories are all tasted blind, so you don't actually know what you're tasting. Like, you'll be able to tell, oh, this is a single malt, but you won't know, am I in the budget category or I'm in the more expensive older category, and you don't know what the whiskies are, so it's completely blind. And since there's like 100 or 200 people tasting them, they all get averaged out. So if someone really likes peat, their score is being balanced against someone who doesn't like peat, to kind of get like the market response to the various whiskies. So these whiskies are all going to be very nice, very enjoyable, and you can kind of reliably understand that they're going to be a nice whiskey that you'll probably enjoy. I'll put the full list and the full rankings down below, because there's winners and then there's gold medalists who are like runners up who got really high score but didn't get the top score. So I'm going to start off with this one here, the best new Irish whiskey. Really nice from Cullen. Like I said, the Powerscourt Distillery. It's a single malt whiskey, but it's very nice. It's very approachable, very drinkable. It's very fruity. It has this kind of citrusy green apple note while still being a very nice malt whiskey. It's also not very expensive. Comes in at 46%, and I can definitely see why it is like the best new whiskey for this year, because it has only been released in the last few months. I don't think it stands up against maybe some of the more established, more like vintage players where they've got like really old stocks of whiskey which they can blend in, but still, for a new release from a new distillery, fantastic little whiskey. I'm moving away from the brand new whiskey into like the overall whiskey. It was from Dunvilles, which is the Ecklandville distillery, although point to note about that is they are sourcing, they haven't yet released, actually they did just release their brand new whiskey this year, that was their own stuff. Up to now they've been sourcing, so the best overall whiskey from Ireland this year was the Dunvilles 21-year-old Palo Cortado cask. I'll put a picture of that there. I have tasted that before. I haven't got a full bottle because it's very expensive and very hard to find, but it's really good. It's a fantastic whiskey. Like, Dunvilles are, like, I'll get into them later on, they're sourcing whiskey, but they're sourcing very good whiskey, and it came through in that 21-year-old Palo Cortado because it's so nice and so enjoyable. But starting off from like the lower end of categories, like, it's not all about the whiskey. Like, in these awards, we also judge things like the liqueurs. So the overall whiskey liqueur winner this year was the Tullamore Dew Honey. I'll put a picture out up there. I tried that at Whisky Live Dublin a couple of years ago because they didn't release it in Ireland right off the bat. They actually released it in Eastern Europe, got some kind of market response to it, and then maybe they tweaked the recipe a little bit, but they released it here in Ireland this year. Very nice. The honey liqueur with a lot of whiskey, a lot of flavour blended in. It came through really tasty. There's also the cream liqueur category, and the winner for that was the Whistler Irish cream liqueur. Again, picture that there. Very nice, very creamy. It's blended in with like pot still whiskey, so you get this like almost spicy whiskey character that's balanced out against the cream, comes through very, very tasty, very, very enjoyable. There's also the liqueur, the general kind of other liqueur category, which was won by the Cologne Distillery's Gloria liqueur. I've got a bottle of that. I'm probably doing a review of that in the next couple of weeks. Very, very tasty. It's like coffee, poitín, and a little bit of sugar. And it comes through, it's very, very tasty. It's so drinkable. I've given it to people who are scared of poitín, give them a little sip of it. They say, oh, that's really, really nice. And I say, well, that's got poitín in it. And for those of you watching from America, poitín, it's not moonshine, but you can kind of think of it like moonshine. It's like a raw, unaged spirit, which has this reputation of being really, really harsh, but when it's made well, is very, very tasty. And speaking of poitín, the winner of the poitín category this year was the Micil Heritage Poitín, which again, I've tasted, has a little bit of like peated malt in it, has a nice little bit of smoke, but the spirit itself is very, very tasty. I think if it went into a cask, it would make for a very, very good whiskey, but even just raw, that spirit is very, very tasty. But let's get on to the main kind of whiskey categories. I'm not going to go through every single one. Again, I'll put the link down below, the list down below to all those various different winners, and I'll put links to my reviews of those whiskies because some of them are really, really great. But starting off with the blend category. So the blend was divided into blend under €50, blend over €50, blend with an age statement, and blend that was like a limited edition blend. The one that was under €50, which is like your kind of bargain, you know, not budget, but you know, kind of a bargain whiskey. The winner for that was the Dunvilles 3 Crowns Sherry whiskey. So again, coming from Dunvilles, again, it's got some sourced whiskey in there because Dunvilles are only brand new of a distillery. But again, shows they're sourcing a lot of good whiskey. It has this, again, I'll put a picture of that there. It's a very nice looking whiskey, but also a very, very tasty little whiskey. When it comes to whiskies that are over €50, so getting into that, still a blend, still like not like top shelf whiskey, what you might say, but a kind of more premium product. Shortcross Distillers Duo. I actually haven't tasted this one yet, but I really do want to taste it because it won the award. So I'm definitely going to see if I can hunt down a bottle of that for myself because like Shortcross, again, they're a new distillery. They're putting out some stuff. I've tasted some of their whiskey that's like 2 years old, so it's not whiskey yet. And I've tasted some of their stuff that's like 3 or 4 or 5 years old. So I'm getting up into that age statement. Very, very tasty, and it's very, very enjoyable. So I know they're sourcing good stuff, and I know they know what they're doing. So they're probably putting out some very nice whiskey. Then we get into the blend with an age statement, and it's a brand I actually haven't covered any of their whiskey at all yet. I've only ever tasted it once at a bar. Put a picture of that there. It's the McConnell's Sherry Cask. This is again a whiskey I haven't really tried, so I can't really speak about it, but I mean, it won the award, so it's probably gonna be very good. I mean, obviously I have tasted it because I would have tasted it blind, but I didn't know I was tasting it at the time. Apparently very, very tasty, definitely one to keep an eye out for. And when it comes to the blend, that was like a limited run. So this is one, it's a blended whiskey, obviously, but it was a limited edition run. So it was only put out a small amount of it. This was the Hinch Whiskey Distillery, the Hinch Whiskey Company, their whiskey, the 5-year-old, which was finished in a Madeira wine cask. So again, Madeira can give you a lot of sweet notes, which should add a lot of flavor to a nice blended whiskey. But let's move away from the blends and into the single malt whiskies. I mean, don't get me wrong, there were some great whiskies in that blended category. Even some of the runners-up are whiskies that everyone enjoys, like Jameson Black Barrel's in there. Some of the releases from the Whistler brand were in there. Very, very tasty whiskies. So obviously there's a lot of good blends out there, but we're moving on to single malts. And again, the single malt was divided up into kind of 4 main categories. Malts that are under €60, malts that are over €60, malts that are 12 to 15 years old, and malts that are 16 years and above. So it doesn't matter what the age statement is, they're 16 years and above. So the winner of the malt under €60 was the the Egan's Fortitude. I'll put a picture of that there. I've tasted that a few times at bars, at tastings. Very, very nice whiskey. Haven't bought myself a full-size bottle of it yet, but I know it's a very, very tasty little whiskey. And for under €60, you're getting a lot of flavour. Even though it is sourced whiskey, they're doing nice things with the casking, with the finishing and the blending. So they're putting together some nice little whiskies there. Then we get into the next 3 malt categories, and they're all going to be from Dunvilles. I'm going to tell you right now that all the winners were from Dunvilles. The malt that was over €60 was their 10-year-old PX or Pedro Jimenez cask. The 12 to 15 was a limited edition release, one they called the Stories and Sips release, and the one that was 16 years and above was the overall winner, that 21-year-old Palo Cortado cask I mentioned earlier. And you might notice there's a lot of Dunvilles there. There's actually a lot of sourced whiskey there, and Dunvilles, I will say, I very much like what they're doing. We in the Irish Whisky Society have got casks of their whiskies, and while yes, it is sourced, it's taken from another distillery, they didn't make it themselves, they put a lot of work into their casking, into their finishing program, into their blending program. So it's one of those things that you can like what Dunvilles, what the Ecklandville distillery, you can like what they're doing, even though they're sourcing it. You can kind of say, oh, I know that if they're putting this much care into whiskey where they've only got it for the last, let's say, 5 or 6 years of its life, if they have it for the whole of that whiskey's journey, right from when it was distilled all the way through, it's going to be a very, very good finished product at the end of the day. So a lot of Dunvilles in there, which means it's a lot of whiskey from other distilleries that's been finished by the Dunvilles brand, but they know what they're doing. And now we move on to the pot still whiskey category. And there were 2 main pot still whiskey categories. There was the pot still under 11 years old and over 11 years old. And for this, the winner of the under 11 years old was the Redbreast Iberian series, what they're calling it, like the Iberian Peninsula, the Spanish Peninsula. It's the PX or Pedro Jimenez edition, which is now actually a core release. It was originally part of the Iberian series, like a limited run they were doing, but then it got such a good reception, it's now become a core release, and so that won the under 11 years old. And the over 11 years old was won by the Middleton Very Rare Barry Crockett Legacy whiskey. And so the Middleton Very Rare is just like their blended whiskey product. It's like their flagship. It's grain whiskey and malt whiskey, and single pot still whiskey blended in together, whereas the Barry Crockett Legacy is just pure pot still, 100% pot still whiskey. And one thing I'll note about the winners in this category and all the runners up in the pot still whiskey categories, they were all from the Middleton distillery, because Middleton is probably the most established player when it comes to making that Irish style of whiskey, the pot still Irish whiskey, because they've got stocks that are very old. They got stocks that have been maturing for, I've tried one of their Powers blended components that was 34 years old. Really, really tasty, really, really full flavored. And so when they want to make a new whiskey, whether it's the Middleton Very Rare that's over 11 years old, or even like the Redbreast 27, the Redbreast 21, the Redbreast 18, they can pull stock that's like 20, 25 years old and blend it in and come up with a whiskey that's really, really good. So it's not surprising to me that Middleton were dominating that category, because that's their kind of chief style. And with pot still whiskey, because it's peppery, because it's a bit spicy, it does benefit from a little bit of time in cask. We can get a bit of flavor, so it's not just that one peppery, spicy note. We also get the influence of the cask coming through to match that big, strong flavor of the spirit. There were other categories as well, don't get me wrong. There's like vodkas, there's like single grain whiskey, which was won by the Lochreed distillery with one of their bridge whiskies. I'm not going to get into every single whiskey. Like I said, there'll be lists down below of all the winners, and there'll be links to my reviews of different whiskies. And maybe when you're down there looking at that list, let me know if you tried it. Let me know if you disagree with the award rankings. I myself will have my own list of the reviews, the whiskies I reviewed this year, which I thought were my top 5. I'll have that video coming out in the next couple of weeks. But this was the kind of overall Irish Whiskey Awards, whiskies that were new, like this one here from Cullen, or whiskies that are old, established players. Either way, I'm going to keep on enjoying this whiskey, and I'll see you next time. Let's launch it.